This video deals about the Wole Soyinka telephone conversation. This unit aims to highlight the focus on poetry. It enables the students to know the poetic notions and apply them to their daily life. It lays the foundation for the appreciations of the beauty of language. It educates their emotions and improves their power of imagination. The rhyme of poetry helps the student to obtain a natural speech rhythm. Whole Soyinka poetry has often been described as a powerful and serious agent of social change. His themes are primarily concerned with the promotion of human morals and African politics. Telephone conversation reveals a lyrical understanding of the rhythms and reasonings of language balanced with humor and a deeply felt comparison for the human condition. Appearing initially in the collection Modern Poetry from Africa, the poems is a provocative interrogation of racial prejudice, misguided civility, and the power of language to create ghettos of phrase and of spirit. The opening line of the poem should grab the reader's attention, invoke the thematic sense of the poem, and gives a vision of the poet's writing style. The message can be found after knowing the meaning of poetry. Message of the advice is captured by readers as an impression after reading the poem. How the reader concludes the message poetry is closely related to the point of view of the reader towards something. About the poet. As a dramatist, Soyinka has been influenced by, among others, and the Irish writer J.M. Singh, but links up with the traditional popular African theatre with its combination of dance, music, and action. He bases his writing on the methodology of his own tribe, the Yoruba, with Ogin, the god of iron and war, at the center. He wrote his first plays during his time in London. The Swamp Dwellers and the Lion and the Jewel light comedy, which were performed at Ibadan in 1958 and 1959 and were published in 1963. Among Soyinka, serious philosophic plays are The Strong Breed, The Road, The Death, and The King's Horseman. In the Barche of Euripides, he has rewritten the Barche for the African stage, and in opera Juan Yossi bases himself on John Gay's Beggars opera and Brecht's The Threepenny Opera. Soyinka's latest dramatic work are A Play of Giants and Requiem for a Philologist. Soyinka has written two novels, The Interpreter's Narratives, narratively a complicated work which has been compared to Joyce's and Faulkner's, in which six Nigerian intellectuals discuss and interpret their African experiences, and Season of Anatomy, which is based on the writer's thoughts during his imprisonment and confronts the Orpheus and Eurydice myth with the mythology of the Yoruba. Purely biographical are The Man Died, Presence Notes, and the account of his childhood, in which the parents' warmth and interest in their son are prominent. Literary essays are collected in, among others, myth, literature, and the African world. Summary. Telephone Conversation is a poetic satire against the degenerated and inhumane conditions of black people in the society. As the title suggests, the poem depicts a telephone conversation between a West African man and a British landlady who astonishingly changes their attitude towards the man soon after he reveals his racial identity. It also grapples with the issue of racism that waits within the minds of countless individuals. The poem is a scathing comment on the usual issues of racism and racist prejudice. Soyinka, through his poem, depicts a conversation between a white landlady and the black tenant and sheds a light on the provincial racial discrimination and hatred in the society at large. The poem begins on a peaceful note with a conversation between the two people in which the African American man is looking for a place to rent. After considering the price, location, privacy, and other relevant matters, he makes up his mind to consider the offer. Keeping in mind that the incident of racial prejudice in the past, he decided to reveal his identity to the landlady. During the course of the dialogue, he straightaway admits to the lady that he is a black and does not want to waste time and energy of the if the lady is going to refuse him on the ground. After realizing the personal racial identity, complete silent and unused for a while. The prospective tenant considered silence as the recurrent result of the inbuilt sense of politeness. The poet deliberately uses the imagery of lipstick coated, long gold rolled cigarette holders pepped. They showcase the highest social class of the lady. The poet's show power of the imagination enables him to visualize an affluent and sophisticated British landlady belong to the progressive and urban world on the other side. After listening to the landlady, all his assumptions as well as the figment of his own imagination were shattered into pieces. Keeping aside all the formalities, the landlady directly inquired him for that how dark are you? Light or even very dark. For a while, he thinks that he might have misunderstood, but later realized that the lady is repeatedly asking the same question with varying emphasis. The questions turned out to be devastating for him as he represents a sense of racism. Therefore, he was sickened by the unexpected series of questions and desires himself to be a mission, but like a phone. He can feel the sense coming strange coming out from her misleading words and started seeking inflamed everywhere around him. The emphasis on the lady, especially above the poet's color, reflects her racial bias towards the prospective. The sudden change in the tone of the land and the lady clearly reflects her coldness and apathy towards the people belonging to the specific community. Perplexed and humiliated by the tense and awkward silence, the man tries to speak some explanation and thinks that the lady has given her the opi- op- opinion to choose from. Understanding the intent of the lady, he himself repeats her question, stating that she would like him to compare himself with a chocolate, dark or light. The usage of metaphors such as spectroscopic not only depicts the psychological state of her mind but also shows her eagerness to find out what color the poet was. After a while, the man understood her question that his skin color can be pictured as West African Piam, as it's written on his passport. The lady remains confused, not wanting to admit to her ignorance and confused as she was unable to understand the answer and preferred to remain silent for a while. Afterwards, she could not restrain herself and sought clarification from the man. What's that? The man replies that it is almost similar to being a dark brunette. The selflessness of the lady almost compels the man to break all the codes of formality. A satirical tone, he mocks the lady by saying that he is in all black, the sole of his feet and the palm of his hands are completely white. He knows that the landlady will never be convinced by his black complexion and he sensed that she might slam down the receiver anytime. It is crucial juncture. He makes a desperate attempt to convince her to come to see for herself, only to have the phone slammed on him. The poem, in a sarcastic tone, brings the forth absurdly human follies, racial hatred, and discrimination that remains into society. By showcasing the absurdity of all prejudice, the poem mocks and criticizes the psychological state of a woman who rejects the rent and accommodation to the man on the basis of his skin color. Wole Soyinka experimented many different cultures at a relatively young age. These cultures are each confused to his playwright style and form a unique varying techniques, thematic structures, and even different forms of literature. His infusion of these often makes for a very complex drama. Soyinka is known for using a very neoclassical technique in his play. He has the ability to give a new life to the old piece. Young people who attended his shows would see the relevance in the traditions they considered primitive. This is very much a case in Death and the King's Horseman, in which Wanka even uses a five-act structure and stays true to the three units. He often broke standards of staging and tried many new things. In Horseman, Soyinka toys with a different form of the character doubling rather than putting the actor through religious hair and makeup changes between characters. He would keep them in one look for the entirety of the play. This was meant to save time and facilitate smoothness in the plot action. He was also in the habit of providing limited direction for the actor. The playwright would rather mean come to his actors in free so they could better understand the character. This is probably one reason his plays are so believable. Soyinka's play generally took one of the two thematic directions: a simple play layered with Yoruba culture, or an ambiguous play dealing with metaphorical issues. Mad Men Specialist, The Road, and The Dance of the Forest all are good examples of the latter. However, he always seems to add a bit of comedy or at least political satire. Soyinka plays novels and poetry records 20th century Africa's political turmoil and its struggle to reconcile to tradition with modernization. With a style that combines a European dramatic form with traditional folk drama in the Yoruba tongue. Niger Congo language family. Soyinka presents both satire and spectacle on the stage, the first Black African writer to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Soyinka is also well known as a political activist in Nigeria. After style of writing. After high school and a brief period as a clerk in Lagos, Soyinka attended the University College in Nigeria. He published several poems and short stories before leaving Africa in 1954 to attend the University of Leeds in England, where the invention his first play was produced in 1957. At Leeds, Swanka expanded his awareness of Western literary and literary traditions. He was awarded as a BA in 1957, started work on a master degree, and moved to the London, all the while continuing to be involved in the theatre. Themes of telephone conversation. Telephone conversation is a dramatic monologue in which a person of a color responds to the racial prejudice of a woman. With women, he is trying to negotiate rental accommodations. As the poem begins, the speaker's well-educated and polished voice, as heard to the telephone, makes him acceptable to the landlady. But when he turns to the crucial moment of the self-confession, the truth of the racial struggles come to the forefront. The landlady clearly does not want a tenant of a color, yet at the same time it's trapped by the code of the civil conduct that will not allow her to acknowledge what might be considered an uncivilized racial prejudice. The cluster of assumptions articulated by the well-bred land gathered into the almost textbook definition of racism. She is chauvinistic in she engages her vocabulary of racial stereotypes, and her unwillingness to rent a man of color reinforces a policy of racial segregations or what has been called ghettoization. It is a possible for diverseness that poem speaker attempts to undercut in the closing lines of the poem when he effectively breaks down the landlady's powerful fixation with the word dark throughout his unknown list of the various shading that might clarify for her the abstraction of darkness. The speaker notes he is simultaneously a man who is brunette, raven black, and in a wonderful twist, peroxide black on the palm of his hand and sole of his feet. Analysis of the poem Telephone Conversation. Telephone Conversation is a poem that about racism and the engaging mindset of the certain white people who, for whatever reason, discriminates on the grounds of the race and in particular skin color. Wole Soyinka's poem takes the shape of a dialogue between two people on the phone, an African man and a white British landlady. The man is looking for somewhere to rent and need a room, apartment, or a flat, but for the landlady there is an obstacle. He is a black. He knows that is a fact could potentially ruin his chance of gaining accommodation. So he anticipates the prejudice and saves a waste of journey by confessing. What makes him poem special and different in this use of humor and quiet sensitivity to explore the very serious issue of inbuilt everyday racism, how simply act of looking for accommodation can turn into a social disaster or moral dilemma. It is also written in a dramatic fashion. Whole Soyinka is a both playwright and poet, novelist, lecturer, has been flavored dialogues within the scene of a play. Note the use of the irony and sarcasm, which serves to ridicule the idea of the racism and makes the landlady appear rather foolish. Thank you.